When I decided to move into a nursing home, I thought it was best for me. My family kindly suggested it, saying I would be better cared for, more accompanied, more at ease. I saw it as a way to rest, to leave daily worries behind. I would no longer have to cook, clean, or worry about what might happen to me when I was alone. Everything seemed logical, and so I agreed. But over time I realized something nobody told me, that when you enter a nursing home, you don't just change houses, you change lives, and not always for the better. It wasn't immediate. The first days were calm, almost pleasant. But little by little I began to notice things that hurt. Small at first, but that over time became large. I lost routines, I lost choices, I lost spaces. And the hardest part, I began to feel that I was losing myself. Today, I want to tell you something I wish I had known before making that decision. Because if you're thinking about moving into a nursing home, or if you have a loved one who is, I want you to hear what I'm about to share. Not to scare you, but to help you decide with your eyes wide open. I'm going to share 8 truths. 8 things I discovered far too late. Some are harsh, others simply sad. But all are real, and they can make the difference between a life with meaning or a life on hold. I wish someone had told me before. Before we continue, I want to ask you a question. How old are you? And if you don't mind sharing, where are you listening from? I'd love to read your answers in the comments. Because this channel is for us, those of us who have already walked a long road and still have much to say. Now then, let's begin with the first truth. Truth 1. Loss of independence comes much sooner than you think. On the first day, I felt like a guest. On the second, like a prisoner without a key. I remember perfectly the moment I crossed the nursing home door for the first time. Everything looked clean, organized, efficient. They gave me a room with a private bathroom, a comfortable bed, even a window overlooking the garden. They told me I could live quietly, that I didn't have to worry about anything. And that was the problem, because in reality, nothing depended on me anymore. The first sign was breakfast. I woke early, as I always had at home, and went to the dining room. But they told me I had to wait, that breakfast was served at a fixed hour. I could no longer make myself a cup of coffee whenever I pleased, nor eat toast while looking out the window. Now I had to wait for someone to tell me it was time. Then came the activities, walks, exercises, games, all on predetermined schedules, with lists, with supervision. They told me it was to keep us active, that it was for our own good, and I wanted to believe it. But soon, I understood that everything I did, each step I took, was subject to rules. If I wanted to go out to the courtyard, I had to notify someone. If I wanted visits outside visiting hours, it wasn't possible. If I fancied eating something other than what was served that day, there was no alternative. And so, little by little, I began to lose things. I could no longer decide when to take a shower. I no longer chose which clothes to put on each morning, because someone always suggested the most comfortable or the easiest to manage. They even suggested when I ought to go to bed, because tomorrow we have to get up early for the medical check. At home, if I wanted to go for a walk, I went. If I wanted silence, I could have it. If I simply wanted to stay in pajamas all day, I did. Those little decisions, the ones that seem insignificant, are what make you feel in charge of your life. Here, each of those decisions disappeared, slowly, without my noticing. It's not that you can't do things, it's that they convince you it's better if you don't. And the most dangerous part is that you begin to accept it. You start saying, well, it doesn't matter. It's not that important. Better that they do it for me. But inside, part of you begins to fade. Once I tried to make myself a cup of coffee. I went to the common kitchen and an aide said with a smile, "Don't worry, Mr. Ernest. I'll make it for you." She did it kindly, of course. But in that gesture was also the message, you no longer need to do these things. And that's when I realized, it wasn't that I couldn't. It was that they wouldn't let me. When you stop making your own decisions, no matter how small, you stop being yourself. You become someone who simply waits. Waits to be taken, to be called, to be told what to do. Loss of independence doesn't arrive all at once. It's not a dramatic event. It's a series of small renunciations, one after another. And one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize the man you were. That is the first truth nobody told me. In a nursing home, independence doesn't vanish because you don't have it. It vanishes because everything around you is designed so you don't need it. And once that happens, it's very hard to get it back. Truth 2. You feel like a number, not a person. One morning, while I was waiting for my medication, I overheard an aide in the hallway say, "Has the one in room 214 eaten yet?" The one in room 214. That was me. Not even Mr. Ernest. Not even Sir. Just a number. As if I were part of the furniture. As if who I was no longer mattered. And that was one of the moments I understood something was very wrong. In nursing homes, especially the busy ones, it's common for staff to work in shifts. Morning, afternoon, night. New faces come and go constantly. Some with goodwill, others clearly exhausted. And amid so much change, so many tasks done against the clock, care becomes quick, impersonal, almost mechanical. Everything is programmed for efficiency, not human connection. Once I felt unwell. I had a slight discomfort in my chest. Nothing serious, but it worried me. I rang my call button, and a nurse I'd never seen before came. I explained how I felt, but while I spoke, she checked her watch. She asked a couple of quick questions, wrote something on a chart and said, "I'll note it for the next medical check." And she left. She didn't look me in the eye. She didn't ask how I felt emotionally. She just did the bare minimum and went on her way. I felt invisible. But not everything was like that. I remember fondly Julia, a nurse who used to work the afternoon shift. She took her time. She called me by name, asked how my daughter was, if I'd slept well, if I'd like a cup of tea. One day she even gave me a small plant for my window. "So this place feels a little more like home," she said. And that detail, those small acts of humanity, meant more to me than any medicine. But the problem is that people like Julia are few and overburdened. Most of the time, staff don't have the time or energy to look beyond the uniform, beyond the medical record. And so, you become a data point. A bed to be cleaned, a dose to be delivered, a room to be checked. Routine becomes more important than the person. Everything has a schedule. Medication at 8, shower at 10, lunch at noon. But if you don't feel like eating at that hour, if that day you feel weaker, sadder, more confused, that isn't factored in. Because the system doesn't stop for you. The system moves on. And that, little by little, dims you. You start thinking what you feel doesn't matter. That if you're sad today, no one will notice. That if something excites you, there's no one to share it with. You get used to receiving care, but not affection. They listen to you, but they don't hear you. On one occasion, a new resident arrived crying in her room. Her family had just left her and she felt lost. I knocked gently to see if she wanted to talk, but an aide arrived immediately, gave her a pill and said, "Take this and rest." Then she closed the door. Not another word. That's what happens when care becomes a procedure, when compassion is replaced by protocol. And it's not always the staff's fault. They too are trapped in a structure that forces them to prioritize time over human treatment. But the result is the same. You, as a person, begin to disappear. Because when they call you by your room number instead of your name, when your tastes, your stories, your quirks or joys no longer matter, when you are just one more on a list repeated day after day, then something inside breaks, and it's very hard to repair. That is the second truth I discovered too late. It's not enough to be cared for. You need to feel you are still someone. Someone with history, with emotions, with dignity. And in many nursing homes, that part is forgotten far too quickly. Truth 3. Loneliness is deeper than I imagined. When I moved into the home, many acquaintances told me the same thing. At least you won't be alone. And for a moment I believed it. After all, there are people everywhere. Nursing staff coming and going, other residents sharing halls, lounges, the dining room, noises, footsteps, conversations. There is never complete silence. And yet, I never felt so alone. It's curious how loneliness doesn't always have to do with how many people are around you, but with the quality of the bond you have with them. You can be in a room full of people and still feel invisible. I was surrounded by voices, but not presence. One afternoon, I was assigned a new roommate. His name was Mario. He was about 85, with a calm gaze but very few gestures. He barely spoke. Entire days passed without him uttering a word. He didn't even speak to the nurses. He ate in silence, slept in silence. And when he was awake, he simply sat by the window, staring at something only he could see. At first, I tried to talk to him. I told him about my grandson, my passion for chess, even offered him some sweets my daughter had brought me. But Mario barely smiled. He looked at me with an expression that seemed to apologize for no longer knowing how to be with others. And then I began to understand him. Mario's silence, which at first made me uncomfortable, became a mirror. I began to recognize in him something I did not want to accept, that even when surrounded by people, you can feel completely disconnected. Loneliness here is not the lack of bodies, it's the lack of shared soul. And it's not just Mario. Many people here have stopped talking, not because they can't, but because they feel there's no one to listen. Some have lost their memory, others their energy. And those of us who still have both sometimes lose the will. What's the point of telling something if no one asks? What's the point of sharing memories if no one values them? At home, I also spent much time alone, but it was different. It was my space. My solitude had shape. I had my books, my favorite armchair, my own schedules. If I wanted silence, I sought it. And if I wanted company, I called someone or went for a walk. Here, you don't choose the silence. It envelops you. And it's not just silence of sound, it's emotional silence. No one knows how you feel unless you say it. And often, not even then. I remember one night in particular. It was almost 2 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I got up quietly so as not to wake Mario and walked down the hallway. I sat in one of those chairs near the elevator. It was dark. The dim hallway light barely lit the floor. And there I was, surrounded by closed doors, hearing the distant hum of some medical device. In that moment, I understood I wasn't the only one awake. Loneliness was visiting all of us, but no one dared to speak to it. Because in a nursing home, everything is designed for coexisting, but not for connecting. There are activities, yes. Board games, memory workshops, even music afternoons. But all of that is superficial if there's no real conversation, if there's no space where you can tell your story without feeling you're taking up too much time. Sometimes I longed for something as simple as someone asking me, "And you? How are you really feeling today?" Not out of politeness, not to check a box, but genuinely. Because that is the cruelest loneliness, being surrounded, but with no one you can truly share yourself with. If you're thinking about moving into a nursing home or considering it for a loved one, I want you to understand this. Here you may be accompanied, but that doesn't guarantee you won't feel alone. And if you arrive with a wounded heart, hoping this place will heal it, it may only lull it to sleep. That was the third truth that hit me without warning. Loneliness doesn't disappear because there are people. Loneliness disappears when someone truly sees you. Truth 4. Your family begins to fade away little by little. When I arrived at the home, one of the first consolations for me was thinking of my family, of my daughters, of my grandchildren. They told me they would visit often, that we weren't far away, that this wasn't a goodbye, but a see you soon. I believed them. After all, they're my blood, my people. The first week was good. I received flowers, calls, messages. My grandson made me a drawing, and my daughter promised she'd come every Sunday after church. And so she did, at first. But then the rhythm changed. The second week they arrived late. The third they couldn't come because they had a commitment. The fourth, it was only a quick call. And after that, well, after that came the silences. Don't get me wrong. I know they love me. I have no doubts about that. But I also know life out there doesn't stop. There's work. There are kids to take to school, errands, fatigue. And without meaning to, without malice, they start leaving you behind. At first, you justify everything. They're busy, you say. I'm sure they'll come next week, you repeat to yourself. Maybe they'll call tonight. And then you start living in waiting. Not waiting for a gift or a grand surprise. Just waiting for the phone to ring. For someone to look you in the eye. To ask if you slept well or if lunch agreed with you. I remember my eldest daughter, Claire, used to call me every Friday afternoon. It was our little tradition. She'd tell me about work, about my grandchildren, about the new recipe she was trying. I'd listen carefully, take notes, ask questions. It was my little piece of home inside this place that didn't feel like mine. But one Friday she didn't call. Then 2 weeks passed, and when she finally wrote, she said, "Sorry, Dad. It slipped my mind. It's been a rough week." I understood. Of course I did. But it still hurt. And it's because here, everything hurts more. Not because one becomes weak, but because one becomes more aware of the value of small things. A call, a hug, a 10-minute visit. At home, there are other distractions. Here, every second of attention is a treasure. Sometimes I hear my companions talk. Many say the same thing. My son was coming today, but he had to cancel. My granddaughter promised to bring me photos. I'm still waiting. My family says they think of me often, but they don't come as before. And you can't help but wonder, have we ceased to be part of their active lives? Have they, in a way, emotionally filed us away? Because that is the silent pain of being here. It's not that they don't love you. It's that they forget you. Life out there goes on. Mine stopped here. And I'm not just talking about children. Friends fade too. Some feel awkward coming. Others don't know what to say. And in the end, they drift away. Perhaps because seeing us here reminds them of something they don't want to face. That sooner or later, any of us could end up in a room like this. The worst thing isn't being placed in a nursing home. The worst thing is that once inside, you begin to notice how they unconsciously forget you. And it doesn't break you all at once. It wears you down, like wind against a rock. One silent day, one broken promise, one delayed visit. And little by little, you start disappearing from the center of their world. Truth 5. Your health declines faster than you expect. When I arrived, I felt good for my age. I walked every day, did my morning stretches, even enjoyed cooking something simple at home. I had my routines. They kept me moving, gave me structure, made me feel useful. I wasn't perfect, of course. I had my aches, my slow days. But all in all, I felt my body still responded. But something changed. Not overnight, not the next day. It was progressive, almost imperceptible. Here in the home, everything is designed so you don't have to move. Sounds comfortable, right? It is, but it's also dangerous. Meals come to you. Your clothes are folded for you. Your pills arrive on a tray at exactly the right time. If you need something, you press a button. And if you can't get up, no problem. Someone will do it for you. At first, you're grateful. It's a relief not to have to push yourself so much. But then you begin to notice the effects. Your legs feel weaker. It's harder to get up from a chair. You stop walking down the hall, then you stop going out to the garden, and when you realize, you need that wheelchair you once avoided. I remember Carmen, a friend of mine here. She arrived bursting with energy. She walked daily in the courtyard, always with her shawl over her shoulders. She had that way of walking as if she didn't want time to catch up with her. We became friends quickly. We shared lunch, talked about our families, our stories. But above all, we walked. Until one day she said, "Today I'll stay in my room. I'm a bit tired." The next day, too, and the next. And when she finally ventured out again, she didn't walk. She had begun using a wheelchair just in case. A month later, she couldn't walk without help. I watched her. It wasn't laziness. It was resignation. And that is the most dangerous thing that can happen here. You resign yourself. You get used to not moving, to not trying, to not fighting the rust that settles in your body. And the same happens with the mind. Before, I handled my own affairs, made lists, organized myself. Here, everything is structured. Breakfast at 8, mental exercises at 10, lunch at 12. They tell you what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And in time, your mind relaxes too. Too much. One day I realized I had forgotten my granddaughter's birthday. It had never happened before. And it wasn't for lack of love. It was for lack of stimulus. Here, no one expects you to remember. No one pushes you to think, to plan, to improvise. And that too takes its toll. That's why I say it's not just age that makes you dependent. It's the environment. They design it so you don't need to do anything. And at first it sounds like a blessing. But then you realize it's a trap. Because when you stop doing, you stop being able. And sure, if you fall, if you get sick, if you deteriorate, they're there to help you. But never to give back what you lost. Because only you could keep it. And they took it from you without you noticing. So if you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself something simple. Am I ready to stop doing? Because once you do, it's very hard to go back. I'll continue with the next truths if you'd like. Just let me know. I am 82 years old, and I made a mistake. Truth 6. You lose your sense of purpose. If there's something that sustains you as you grow old, it's not just the body. It's the why, the what for. When I lived at home, each day had small missions. They weren't great things. I wasn't saving the world or running a company. But I had a plant to water, a meal to prepare, a bed to make, a cup of coffee I poured myself as a ritual. I had a list of things to do, even if it was just one. And above all, I had reasons to get up in the morning. Here, in the home, the day begins only because the sun rises. And after that, almost everything is repetition. They wake you at the same hour. They serve you the same breakfast. They ask if you want to join the same activities. Then lunch, then a nap, then afternoon tea, and so on. Again and again. There are no dishes to wash, no door to lock, no dog barking when you arrive, no one depending on you. And that empties you inside. I remember the first Monday I spent here. I got up early, as I'd always done. I walked to the window, sat in the chair and thought, now what? I didn't have to prepare anything. I didn't have to go to the bank or the market or the pharmacy. I didn't have to think what to cook or when to turn on the washing machine. I had to do absolutely nothing. And then that strange feeling settled in my chest, like a mixture of rest and loss, as if I no longer formed part of life's machinery. Don't get me wrong. Here they care for us. They entertain us. They keep us alive. But living isn't just breathing. Living is having something that pushes you forward. An 85-year-old lady I met here once told me, with eyes full of a quiet sadness, before, I had a garden. I knew when to plant, when to prune, when to harvest. My hands were full of soil, and so was my soul. Now they give me a plastic flower to decorate the dining room table. That hit me hard. because I understood exactly what she felt. When you have nothing to care for, you begin to wither yourself. Here everything is solved, and though that sounds good, it also means no one expects anything from you. And when no one expects anything from you, you yourself begin to expect less. Less of you, less of life, less of the time you have left. At home, each day brought a small challenge: changing a light bulb, cleaning a window, fixing a leak, calling a neighbor to borrow sugar. And that, even if it seems minimal, gave you a mission. Here, the days aren't different, and when every day is the same, time loses value. It no longer matters if it's Monday or Friday. It no longer matters if it's summer or winter, because there's no plan, no goal, no reason. And that, over time, doesn't just affect you emotionally. It affects you physically, mentally, spiritually. Because a human being needs to feel useful, needs to have a role, a responsibility, even if it's small, needs to know that today there's something worthwhile to do, and that if you don't do it, your absence is noticed. Here, if you're not there, the system goes on the same, and that hurts. So if you're thinking of moving into a home or deciding for someone else, don't only think about food, shelter, or safety. Think also about this. Will they have something to care for? Will they have a reason to get up tomorrow? Because without that, the rest is just passing time. And we don't come into this world only to pass time. We come to live it. And when purpose is lost, you begin to lose everything else too. Truth 7. Privacy and dignity become privileges. There are things you take for granted all your life. Things so simple, so everyday, that you barely notice them, until they disappear. Locking a door, being in silence, having your own space where no one enters without permission, deciding when, how, and with whom to share your body, feeling you still own something, even if it's only a corner of this world. In a home, the line between the intimate and the public blurs, slowly, almost silently. On the first day, they gave me a shared room. It's temporary, they said, but that temporary became permanent. I shared the space with a man who snored loudly, muttered to himself at night, and with whom I barely exchanged a word. I couldn't read in silence. I couldn't watch my favorite shows without headphones. And worst of all, I couldn't sleep, feeling at ease. One night, I remember it with almost painful clarity. They were helping me change into pajamas. It was a new aide, young, kind, but hurried, in a rush. I already felt uncomfortable depending on someone for something as simple as putting on my pajamas. And just then, while I stood bare-chested, my grandson walked in. He didn't knock. He didn't know he should. He simply opened the door with that innocent energy children have, carrying a drawing for me. But I felt the floor open beneath my feet. Never in my life had I felt so small, so exposed, so stripped. The aide tried to cover me quickly. The child didn't understand why I became so serious. And inside I felt invisible, because in that instant my dignity had gone out the open door. Here, visits come and go, staff too. Many knock before entering, but few wait for a reply. It's not malice, it's routine, because there are many residents, many schedules, many tasks, and your room ceases to be yours. It becomes part of the institution's machinery. You can't choose your roommate. You can't decide if today you want to be alone or need company. You can't play loud music without disturbing others. You can't have a private conversation without someone possibly overhearing. Even the bathroom. Sometimes you need help to get in, to get out, to clean yourself. And so you get used to it. You get used to having no moments that are only yours. You get used to asking before closing a door. You get used to not deciding when to undress or dress. And that isn't living. That is resigning. At home, you can sit in your underwear in front of the TV. You can cry alone in the bathroom without fear someone will open the door. You can be naked, literally or emotionally, without feeling watched. Here, your body stops being a temple. It becomes a medical record, a care routine, a number in someone's schedule. And every time someone enters without knocking, without looking, without asking, every time they hurry to dress you as if you were a doll, every time they call you sweetie or grandpa without knowing your name, they strip away another piece of what makes you a person. Because dignity isn't just a pretty word. It's that feeling of being able to decide for yourself. It's knowing that even if you depend on someone, you remain yourself. And privacy, that closed door, that your space, that sacred silence, shouldn't be a privilege. It should be a right. But here, in a home, sometimes it seems a luxury. If you're considering moving or helping someone move in, ask yourself, are you willing to share your intimacy with strangers? Are you ready for your privacy to depend on others' timing and hurry? Because life becomes very different when you can no longer say, this is my house. This is my space. Truth 8. Leaving isn't as easy as entering. When I came in, I thought it was temporary, a respite, a couple of months while I recovered from a fall, while my daughter reorganized her life, while we found another solution. That was the story we all told ourselves. Me, so I wouldn't be frightened. Them, so they wouldn't feel guilty. But time passes differently in here, and what began as a pause turned into permanence. My home, the one I'd lived in for 30 years, was sold. My furniture, given away. My favorite armchair, the one I used to watch the news with a coffee in hand, no longer exists. My kitchen, my plants, my dog. It was all left behind. And when I asked about the possibility of leaving, of returning to my life, the answer was a mix of silences and excuses. You couldn't live alone. You're more comfortable here now. It would be dangerous. What if something happens to you when you're alone? I understood. They say it out of love, but also out of convenience, because leaving requires more than desire. It requires strength, money, support, and the hardest part of all, it requires a version of you that may no longer exist. When I arrived, I could still walk unaided. Now I need a cane. My legs are weaker, my reflexes slower. The body that entered is not the same one that would walk out. And that scares you, because out there the world didn't stop. My neighbors have changed, my streets have changed. Even how you pay your bills has changed. Here, everything is controlled. Meals, schedules, medications. Outside, I'd have to decide again for myself. And the truth is, I don't know if I could. That is the great trap. This is not a prison. There are no bars, no lock. But after enough time inside, the outside world becomes strange, alien. And even if you dream of freedom, part of you begins to fear it. Because life here is made so you neither want nor can leave. The structure is comfortable, yes, but that comfort can become an invisible cage. And then you understand. Leaving isn't as easy as entering. That with each passing day, your wings rust a little more. That even if you still dream of returning to your space, that space might no longer exist, or you might no longer be the same person who once lived there. So if you're considering a home, think carefully, not only about what you leave behind when you enter, but about how hard it will be to get out when you want to. 8 truths, 8 lessons I learned too late. They're not in brochures, nor in guided tours, nor in the polite talks they give you before you move in, but they are real, and you live them, in silence. Losing your independence, feeling like just another number. Discovering loneliness can scream even in the fullest hallways. Watching your family slowly fade away. Feeling your health decline faster than you expected. Waking up without purpose, without reason. Renouncing your privacy, your dignity. And realizing, perhaps too late, that leaving isn't as easy as you thought. I'm not saying no one should do it. Not all homes are the same. Not all families abandon their loved ones. And not all stories have to end like mine. But if you're going to take this step, let it be with your eyes wide open. Not out of fear, not out of pressure, not because it's expected. Do it knowing what may come. Do it knowing what you could lose. And most importantly, do it knowing what you can still defend. Because growing old isn't surrender. It's a new stage. And like every stage, it must be lived with dignity, with choice, with awareness. If you're still in your own home, if you can still decide for yourself, guard it, protect it, explore alternatives, in-home support, community networks, close relatives, personalized care services. Don't give up your space, your rhythm, your identity before you have to. Keep your autonomy as long as possible, not because it's easy, but because it's precious. Because in that autonomy, in those small daily decisions, lies your true freedom. I don't regret growing old. That is a privilege. What I regret is letting others decide how I should do it. Thank you for being here, for listening until the end. I would love to hear from you. How old are you? Where are you listening from? Your experience can help others too. And if you know someone who's about to make this decision, share this story. Sometimes a timely tale can change a destiny. See you next time.